Montana Territory, spring of 1872. The wind bit through the cottonwood trees along the Musselshell River, and the blood on the widow's cheek was still fresh when Isaac Merrick rode into town. He had not come for trouble. He had come for a sack of flour, a coil of rope, and a quiet night under the stars. What he found instead was a woman on her knees in the dirt, her dress torn, her lips split, and not a single soul doing a damn thing about it. "Get up, Alice," growled the man standing over her, a tall brute with a sheriff's badge half swung on his chest and liquor on his breath. "You think you can say no to me? Your husband is cold in the ground. You think that ring on your finger means anything now?" She didn't answer. She just pressed one hand to her side, where his boot had caught her ribs, and steadied herself to stand. Isaac dismounted without a word, stepped between them, and looked the sheriff straight in the eye. "You done?" he asked, voice even. The sheriff's hand went to his belt, but Isaac moved first. One punch, clean across the jaw, and the man went down hard, badge clattering into the dust beside him. Nobody in the street said a word. Nobody moved. AliceAbbott looked up at the stranger with blood at the edge of her mouth, her hair tangled and her breath shaky. She did not thank him. She did not cry. She just pushed herself up and turned toward her house, limping. Isaac watched her go. He should have walked away. But he did not ask permission to help. Her house stood near the edge of town, a plain two-room cabin with a broken fence and chickens that wandered wherever they pleased. The kind of place built on hard work and loneliness. Isaac waited until dusk before he approached, hat in hand. Alice opened the door with a rifle in her grip. "You're not the first man to come to my door deciding I need help," she said. "I saw what he did," Isaac said. "You do not owe him your name, your home, or your hand. You think I do not know that?" He nodded once. "I believe you do. But I think maybe you are tired. And I think you are alone." She lowered the rifle, but not all the way. "You a preacher? No, then why are you here?" Isaac looked at her hand, still bruised from the fall. "To fix your fence. And if you let me, I will leave after." A long silence passed between them. The cicadas had started up in the grass, and her children, two of them, peeked from behind her skirt. A girl of maybe 8, with sun-browned skin and wary eyes. A boy no older than 5, clutching her leg. "They are all I have," she said softly. He looked down at the children. "My name is Isaac Merrick. I work cattle and break horses. I do not drink. I do not hit women. And I do not take what is not offered." The rifle dropped to her side. "You can start with the west fence," she said. "It is leaning bad." He worked all the next day, hauling posts and digging holes. Alice stayed at the porch, watching him with her arms crossed, never saying much. The little girl, Hannah, brought him water once, her eyes never leaving his face. "You are not like the other men," she said. Isaac took the tin cup from her. "That is because I am not from here. Are you going to marry Mama?" He choked on his water. "No," he said, coughing. "No, I am not." "Good," she said firmly. "She does not want to." But that night, when the stars came out and the air turned cool, Isaac slept under the cottonwoods near the fence line, and Alice brought him a blanket without a word. She placed it down beside him, then turned to leave. "You do not have to be afraid," he said. She paused. "I am not afraid. I am just not foolish." He looked at her straight. "You are not foolish, Alice. You are brave. But brave does not mean you have to do everything alone." She looked away. "My husband died 3 winters ago," she said. "Fever took him in 2 nights. The town said I would not last a spring without a man. Then they said I would not last a year. And now they say I am not grateful for offers I should be thankful to get. You do not owe them anything." "I know that," she said. "But knowing and surviving are not always the same." A long silence passed again. Then she asked softly, "Why did you hit him?" Isaac looked up at the stars, hands resting on his chest. "Because he hit you," 3 days passed. He fixed the fence. He repaired the porch steps. He mended the chicken coop. He never once stepped inside her home. But each night she brought him something, first a blanket, then a plate of stew, then a small candle to keep by his bedroll. On the 4th day, the sheriff came back. Alice was washing clothes at the river when she heard the hoofbeats. The children were inside. Isaac was chopping wood. She saw the badge before she saw the face. "You think I am afraid of you now?" the sheriff sneered, dismounting. "You think that cowboy's gonna keep you safe forever?" Alice did not look toward the house. She held her ground. "I think you should leave." He grabbed her by the arm. And then Isaac was there. He did not speak. He did not warn. He hit the sheriff in the ribs, spun him around, and brought him down in the mud with one strike after another until the man stopped moving. Then he stepped back, breathing hard. Alice looked at him, really looked at him, and something shifted in her eyes. "You keep showing up," she said, voice quiet. "I keep meaning to leave." "Then why do you not?" He looked at her hand, now free from the sheriff's grip. "Because I do not want to." She stepped forward. "You are not like the others." "I hope not." "You scare me," she whispered. "I will never hurt you." "I know," she said. Her voice broke. "That is what scares me the most." He reached for her hand, slow and gentle, and she let him take it. The children watched from the window, faces pressed to the glass. And Alice didn't pull away. By the end of the week, Isaac had moved his bedroll to the lean-to near the barn, though nobody spoke a word about it. Alice gave no instruction, and he didn't ask. But each morning when the rooster called out, he was already at work splitting logs, checking the roofline, or hauling water from the spring. The children had stopped staring. Now they followed. Hannah walked beside him in the fields, trailing her fingers through the tall grass. Caleb, younger and quieter, stuck close to the fence post and carried nails in a little tin. Alice let them go, but kept a watchful eye from the kitchen window, wiping her hands on her apron in small, distracted motions. On a warm afternoon, as Isaac hauled a sack of oats from town, he passed a group of men gathered outside the blacksmith's. Their voices dropped when he approached, but they didn't bother hiding the looks they gave him. "You shacking up with the widow now?" one of them called, a burly man with a missing tooth and a voice like gravel. Isaac didn't pause. "I work where I'm needed. Don't look like she's paying you." "She's not." The man laughed, low and mean. "Then you're a fool, Merrick. Or worse." Isaac kept walking, boots steady on the dirt road. That evening, over cornbread and beans, Alice asked, "What did they say?" He didn't answer right away. Caleb was trying to balance his spoon on the edge of the table. "They think I'm wasting my time," Isaac said finally. Alice didn't look up. "Are you?" "No." She set her fork down. "You're welcome here, Isaac. But I can't give anything I don't have. I didn't ask you to. You will. Eventually they all do. I'm not them." She stood up, taking the plates to the basin. "Then don't become one." Later, after the children were asleep and the wind had picked up through the cottonwoods, he sat on the porch sharpening his knife, the whetstone glinting faint in the moonlight. Alice stepped outside with a shawl draped over her shoulders, her hair tied back. "I was 16 when I married Daniel," she said, not looking at him. "He brought me here from Kansas. Said the air was cleaner, the land cheaper. We built this place with our own hands. That barn, those steps, even the windows. He whittled the frames himself." Isaac said nothing. "He was a good man," she said. "Quiet. Always cold in the mornings, but warm by night. After he died, people stopped saying his name. As if I should forget him just to be useful again." He rested the knife on his knee. "I don't expect you to forget." She turned toward him, arms crossed against the chill. "So what do you expect?" "Nothing." She hesitated. "Then why are you still here?" "Because I like the way Caleb laughs when he sees the chickens. Because Hannah asks smart questions. Because every nail I drive into that fence makes this place stronger. And because you haven't told me to leave. The wind stirred her hair loose. She let it fall. I don't want you to leave, she said. He nodded once, slow. Then I won't. They didn't touch. They didn't say more. But when she went back inside, she left the door unlatched. He stayed on the porch a long time, listening to the night settle around him, the knife untouched in his lap. The next morning, there was frost on the water bucket, and the hens were restless. Isaac met Alice's eyes across the yard as he carried feed to the coop. She didn't smile. But something in her gaze had softened, like a door cracked open, just wide enough for light to come through. By midday, a rider from the county office arrived with an envelope sealed in red wax. Alice opened it alone, standing by the hearth. Her shoulders stiffened. She didn't speak until supper. They're auctioning off the Miller land north of the ridge. 40 acres. Good pasture. Isaac looked up. You thinking of buying? The town would never let me. They'll say I can't manage it. Can you? I've run this place 3 years without a man. But I don't have the money. He leaned back in his chair. I do. She looked at him sharply. I'm not taking your charity. It's not charity. It's an investment. In what? In you. She stood, her chair scraping the floor. Don't make promises that come with strings. There are no strings. She stared at him, hard, waiting for the catch. When none came, she walked out the front door and didn't come back for a long while. That night he found her sitting by the creek, her boots off, feet in the water. Moonlight silvered the surface. She didn't turn when he approached. You don't ask questions, do you? She said. Only when I don't know the answer. She looked up at him, her face unguarded. Do you know mine? I think you've been holding your breath for years. And you think you can make me breathe again? No, he said. But I'll sit with you until you do. She didn't speak. But when he sat beside her, their shoulders touched. She didn't move away. And the water kept flowing, steady and quiet, between the stones. The pasture north of the ridge was yellowing at the tips when Isaac rode out to see it for himself. He took Hannah along, riding double on his horse. She gripped the saddle horn tight, her braid catching the breeze. It was her idea to come. Mama won't say it, but she wants that land, she said, squinting up at him. She's afraid to hope. The soil was firm, the runoff from the hills clean, and there was a spring nestled in a hollow of cottonwoods that hadn't dried even with the heat. Isaac made a slow circle of the boundary markers and said nothing until they reached the far fence, where a fallen tree had taken part of it down. She could graze more stock here, he said aloud, half to himself. Hannah slid down and crouched near a patch of wild clover. We could have a milk cow. Mama always wanted one. He watched her pluck a leaf and tuck it behind her ear. You think she'd let me put in for the deed? She wouldn't stop you. But she wouldn't ask either. They rode back slow. At the cabin, Caleb was stacking kindling in a lopsided pile by the door. Alice was bent over the garden beds, pulling at the weeds with short, firm tugs. She didn't look up when Isaac dismounted, but her sleeves were pushed to her elbows, and her hands were stained with earth. I want to buy it, he said. She sat back on her heels. You already decided? I saw the spring. It's good land. You could double your feed. Maybe even sell some. And if we don't win the bid? Then we don't. But I think we will. Alice stood slowly, brushing dirt from her skirt. How much can you spare? Enough. She studied his face, her jaw tight. I don't want you to go without. I don't need much. Never have. She hesitated, then nodded once. All right. But if it comes to us, it's ours. Not yours alone. He looked at her steady. That's the only way I'd have it. That night, once the children were asleep and the last of the light flickered low in the lamp glass, she stepped outside, arms wrapped around herself. Isaac was sitting beside the wagon, oiling the harness straps. I never asked where you came from, she said. West Texas. Near San Angelo. My family worked cattle. Dry country, hard men. Did you leave on your own? My brother died in a storm drive. After that, there wasn't much holding me. She nodded, quiet for a moment. I thought about leaving once. Taking the children east, finding a cousin near Springfield. But I couldn't do it. The land's buried too deep in me now. You belong to it. I don't know if it belongs to me. You don't need to own something for it to know you. She looked at him, eyes sharp in the low light. Do you believe in second lives? He shook his head. I believe in what you build with your hands. And what you keep safe. She stepped closer, close enough he could smell the lavender soap she used sometimes, when the water was warm enough. I don't want to be afraid anymore, she said. Then don't. It's not that simple. No, he said. But I'm here. She reached for his hand. Her fingers were rough, cool from the breeze. He didn't move, only turned his palm to meet hers. I don't know what this is, she said. It doesn't have to be anything right now. But it's something. He nodded once. It is. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He didn't speak. Neither did she. The wind moved through the trees, and somewhere in the barn, a horse shifted its weight. In the morning, they rode into town together. Alice sat straight in the wagon seat beside him, her chin high. The children stayed behind with the neighbor's eldest girl, a quiet 16-year-old who took to Caleb's gentle ways and promised to keep them near the house. At the county office, the clerk looked between Isaac and Alice, surprised but not bold enough to say anything. When the final bid was scrawled in ink and the seal pressed down, Alice placed her name beside Isaac's. Not below. Beside. They walked out into the sunlight, and Isaac glanced at her. You all right? She took a slow breath, then met his gaze. I think I am. He offered his arm, and after the briefest pause she took it. They didn't speak on the ride home. Words felt too small for what was growing between them, not a promise, not yet. But a knowing. A settling. The way roots take hold after a storm. And when they reached the cabin, and the children came running to meet them, Alice looked at Isaac not with fear, not with pride, but with recognition. He had not asked for a place in her life. But she had made room for him anyway. The weeks turned warm and restless. Wildflowers took root along the ridge beyond the new pasture, and Alice's hands began to carry the scent of sage and crushed mint from the herb rows she'd started behind the barn. She'd taken to walking the fence line in the evenings, checking the posts herself, not because she didn't trust Isaac's work, but because she needed to feel the edges of her land with her own boots, her own breath. Isaac watched her from the far side of the field one evening just after the first rain, the sky still streaked with the last of the pink light. He didn't follow. She walked alone with purpose, not loneliness, and he respected the difference. Inside the cabin, Hannah was brushing Caleb's hair with one of the stiff-handled combs Alice had carved out of bone last winter. The boy sat still, focused on the crust of bread in his hand, and didn't flinch when the comb tugged against the knot. Isaac leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You do that every night? Hannah didn't glance up. Mama says it teaches him patience. That's so? She says boys don't come into the world gentle. They have to be taught. Caleb turned toward Isaac, bits of bread stuck to his cheek. Is that what you learned? Isaac stepped inside, crouched beside him. Took me a while. Alice returned just as the lamps were being lit. She set her hat on the hook by the door, her eyes brushing over Isaac. There's a break near the south corner. Not bad, but it'll need a new rail. I can see to it in the morning. No. I'll do it. He straightened, watching her tie back her hair with the strip of muslin she used when working. You planning to replace every post on your own now? I don't need to prove anything, she said, tugging the knot tighter. But I do need to remember I can. Isaac didn't argue. He only said, I'll bring the tools. That night, while the children slept beneath quilts stitched from old shirts and flour sacks, Alice sat on the porch with a tin cup of boiled chicory in her hands. Isaac joined her after stabling the mare, his shirt still damp from the evening air. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked, not looking at him. "I think about tomorrow's work. I mean beyond that." He leaned back, resting one boot on the rail. "I used to think I'd die in a bunkhouse somewhere. Or under a horse that had had enough of me. And now? I wonder what a quiet life might feel like." She turned her cup in her hands. "You think this place is quiet?" "I think it could be." She didn't speak for a while. Then, "I'm not used to being looked at without being measured. You're not a sum to figure. I've spent years being one." He shifted toward her. "I don't want anything from you that you wouldn't give freely." Her voice was low. "And if I don't know what I have left to give?" He reached for her hand, slow, letting her meet him halfway. "Then I'll wait." She didn't pull away. Her grip was unsteady, but it held. The next morning, she was already out by the break in the fence before the sun cleared the hilltop. Isaac found her hammering in a new rail, her sleeves damp with dew, her jaw tight with focus. He didn't offer to take the hammer. He only held the rail steady while she drove the nails clean. When they finished, she sat on the earth, catching her breath. He handed her the canteen, and she drank without hesitation. "I read once," she said, wiping her mouth, "that a woman who owns her land is seen as unnatural." "By who?" "Men who think a woman ought to be owned with it." He sat beside her. "You think I see you that way?" "No," she said. "That's the problem. I keep waiting for you to. And you don't." "I never will." She looked at him, really looked, eyes pale with early light, mouth soft and unreadable. Her fingers brushed his on the grass. "Then we'll need to figure out what to do with that." He didn't move. "We will." In the days that followed, they began to work in rhythm. Not just with hands, but in silences and shared glances, in the way Alice left a second cup cooling beside his place before he came in from chores, or the way Isaac wrapped the fence wire tighter than needed because he knew she'd check it herself. One afternoon, while Alice was boiling rags for soap, Hannah stood at the door with her arms crossed. "Are you going to marry Mama?" Isaac didn't answer right away. "Why do you ask?" "Because she's different now. She hums sometimes when she's working." "And you think that means she wants to marry?" Hannah's eyes narrowed. "It means she trusts you." "That's harder." He looked past her, toward the garden, where Alice was bent over the rose, her movements sure and unhurried. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Hannah nodded once. "Then you'll need to build her another clothesline. The old one's sagging." Isaac smiled. But only a little. That evening, Alice found a fresh post set in the ground beside the porch, the line already tied and stretched. She paused, touched the knot, then turned toward the barn where Isaac was brushing down the mare. She stood just inside the door. "You didn't need to do that." "I know." She studied him for a long moment. "I'd marry you, Isaac." "If you asked?" He straightened, brush still in hand. "I'd ask you, Alice. If you were ready. I'm not afraid now." He stepped toward her. "Then I'm asking." She reached up, cupping the side of his face, her thumb resting just beneath his eye. "I'll say yes," she said. "But not because I need you." He laid his hand over hers. "Because you want me." Her voice trembled but held. "Yes." The mare snorted behind them, shifting her weight. Alice laughed, sudden and soft, and Isaac leaned his forehead to hers. They stood there a long time, the dust settling around their boots, the light slanting gold through the cracks in the barn wall. And outside, the cottonwoods rustled like a hymn. The wedding was small and quiet, held beneath the cottonwoods near the creek, where the earth still carried the scent of spring water and moss. Alice wore a dress she'd sewn years ago, a dark blue muslin that had once been meant for a church service she never got to attend. Isaac stood beside her with the sleeves of his cleanest shirt rolled to the elbow, his hat in his hands, and his voice steady as he spoke the words. Hannah and Caleb gathered wildflowers that morning and placed them on the table as their offering. The neighbor girl who'd watched them once before came again, this time to help with the cooking and to hold Caleb's hand when he got restless during the vows. No preacher was needed. The law had already seen the papers signed, and Alice had never been one to find holiness only in words. Afterward, they ate cornbread and dried apple pie at the long table Isaac had built from pine planks and fence nails. The sun sat low by the time the last plate was cleared, and the children lay curled together on the porch, drowsy from too much bread and the rare sweetness of molasses. As twilight deepened, Alice stepped inside to light the oil lamp, her bare feet quiet on the floorboards. Isaac followed her, his boots left at the door. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and lavender soap, and the hush between them wasn't silence so much as understanding. She turned to him, her hair unbound and falling past her shoulders. "Nothing feels different," she said. "Does it need to?" She shook her head. "No. It feels like we just stepped into something we'd already built." "I reckon we did." She reached for his hand, the lamplight catching the gold band now resting on her finger. "I didn't think I'd ever have this again." "You didn't have it before." "Not like this." He stepped closer. "You didn't have me." She leaned in until her brow touched his. "You're not afraid of ghosts." "I've got my own," he said. "But yours don't scare me." They lay together that night for the first time in the same bed, not hurried, not unsure. Alice's fingers traced the scar along Isaac's ribs, the one he'd never spoken of. He pressed his mouth to the curve of her shoulder, where freckles scattered like dust over bone. No words passed between them. They didn't need to. The quiet held. In the weeks that followed, the rhythm of the land changed, though not in ways the neighbors could name. Isaac's tools stayed by the barn door, but now Alice's sewing basket waited beside his boots. She still took the ledgers to the table each Sunday, but now he sat across from her, checking the stock tallies while she added up the feed costs. She corrected his numbers without apology. He didn't mind. The new pasture proved good. They brought in 2 young cows from a rancher downriver, both heavy with calf. Alice traded a bolt of homespun for them, and Isaac dug a second well near the south line for their water. Caleb helped carry stones for the ring, his arms shaking with effort, but proud. One afternoon, while Alice was mending shirts on the porch and Isaac was hauling the last of the season's hay into the loft, Hannah stood between them with a folded paper in her hand. "It came from the school," she said, eyes fixed on her mother. Alice set her needle aside. "Did you get into the county program? They want me to sit for the exam next month. If I pass, I can train in Lewistown." Alice looked to Isaac without speaking. His jaw tensed, but he nodded. "You'll need a chaperone," he said. "I can go with her," Alice offered. "Just until she settles." Hannah's voice wavered. "I don't want to leave the farm." "You won't," Isaac said. "You're just stretching your legs. That's not the same as walking away." Alice stood and brushed the thread from her skirt. "You're allowed to want more. That doesn't mean you love what you have any less." Hannah folded the paper again, tighter this time. "Does that mean you're proud of me?" Alice stepped forward and touched her face, her voice steady. "I've always been proud. You just didn't always see it." That night, after the children were asleep and the dishes were cleaned, Alice curled into Isaac's chest beneath the quilt she'd made from their wedding clothes. His arm rested across her waist, his breath warm against her neck. "You ever think we'd get here?" she asked. "No," Isaac said. "But I hoped." She reached down and tangled her fingers with his. "It's better than I let myself imagine. You made it that way." She closed her eyes, her body softening beside his. "No. We did." The next spring, Hannah passed her exam and left for Lewistown, riding in the freight wagon beside her mother. Alice stayed a week in town, then came home with new boots for Caleb and a pair of ivory buttons Isaac would later carve into toggles for her coat. The calves were born healthy. The garden doubled in size. The post office clerk began calling Alice Mrs. Merrick, though she never asked for it, and Isaac signed the new feed contracts with both their names. Caleb grew taller. Hannah sent letters every week, her handwriting steady and her words full of questions about the pasture, the weather, and how her brother was doing with his sums. Alice read them aloud after supper, and Isaac always listened without speaking, one hand resting over hers on the table. Years passed, slower but fuller. The land stayed theirs. The fence held. The trees thickened along the creek, and the house warmed with every season. And through it all, they stayed together, still building, still choosing one another. The morning Isaac turned 50, Alice gave him a new bridle stitched with her own hands. He kissed her behind the barn in full daylight, with the chickens complaining at their feet and Caleb rolling his eyes from the pump. It was the kind of life that didn't make stories. But it made a family. And in the end, it made everything worth it.